welcome to Not Fun, Unproblems, the not podcast that's not about ungame not designing. AJ, how are you?
Bewildered. How are you?
I'm Peter C. Hayward. I'm with AJ Brandon. I'm doing all the introductions differently today. What are we talking about today, AJ?
I have no idea. You said, AJ, I want to talk to you about picking cards from a hand. And I said,
Yes.
all right, let's do it.
So I was at a playtest event a few weeks back, and I think I talked about this in a previous episode. I played one of the most interesting prototypes I'd ever played. It was like a train game. Did I talk about this?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, okay. So I'm going to dive into the rules of this prototype a little bit. I don't think the designer will mind. In the game, you were putting down tiles, like hex-shaped tiles onto a grid to basically build a train network. It was not train-themed at all, but it was very clearly a train game, and I played it as a train game and had a very good time. And the way that I think I mentioned this, the game was just over like structured. So the way the game worked is at the start of the game, you would draw 5 tiles, and on your turn, you would each simultaneously choose one to play face down, and then simultaneously reveal them, and then starting player going around, you would play one. And after you've done that, you could discard any number of tiles and then draw any number of tiles to your hand of 5. And like, that's just 10 too many steps for any game.
Oh, I'm glad you said that. I thought I was supposed to be able to follow this perfectly for your next, I was like, okay.
No, not at all. And the struggle that the game designer was having was that he realized that the players needed some amount of information, not too much information, but not... So I just wanted to do a mini episode about the different ways that you can provide players with options on their turn, specifically with the frame of like having a hand of cards. Because this is something that I would say comes up in 70% of games, minimum. Like, it's a very common thing to be like, you have a hand of cards or you have a market of cards and you play one in your turn.
All right.
Make sense? You following me so far?
Yep, I'm on board.
So what I think happened with this designer, who was very lovely and very enthusiastic, is that he just didn't have the tools that I had and in my toolbox and the ability to assess the different strengths or weaknesses of them. So I'm just going to go through a few and talk about why they work and why they don't. And AJ, I'm sure you'll have opinions and also picked up on some that I missed. So the basic structure of the game that we're talking about here is on your turn, you select and play a card. And maybe where you're playing it, you have options, maybe not. Doesn't matter. The primary thing is that you select and then play an option. In this game, it was tiles. It would often be cards. The simplest version of this that I can think of one very famous game that does is you just have a deck of cards, and on your turn, you draw the top card and you play that one. There is no choice. There is no decision point. There's no complexity. It's just draw the top one and play that. Do you know what game I'm thinking of?
Is that Candyland?
Oh no, that's a great guess though. That is famously that, but there's one in our hobby that I think we all admire as a game that does it.
Would Exploding Kittens count? Because you do play cards before that.
No, because you have a full hand of cards. No, Carcassonne.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I love Carcassonne, and I actually love this feature of Carcassonne, which a lot of gamers don't. A lot of gamers play with this variant where you have 2 in hand or whatever. But I love the purity of, in Carcassonne, you flip the top tile, and then you choose where to place it. And the placing is the choice, not the flipping the top tile. Now, obviously it has weaknesses of randomness, blah, blah, blah. I don't care about that at all. I like the elegance and the interestingness and the way it forces you into like, look, this is the one that you're playing. What are you going to do? It doesn't align with your plans. That's part of the game. So that's the very, very simple end of choosing a card to play from your hand. The next up from that, and I'm sure you'll get this one, is you have 2 cards in your hand and you play one. What's the famous game that does this? And I'd love it if you have more than the one I'm thinking of, but there's one very famous one.
Love Letter?
Yes, correct. The beautiful elegance of Love Letter. You have 2 cards in hand, you play one, draw one. It means you always have a choice, but the choice is extremely limited. There's no hand management. I mean, there's literally a hand management aspect, but It's the most basic form there is. And this works with Love Letter because where you're playing the card, you don't really get a choice of. You're just playing it. Often the card will present a choice, such as, choose another player and choose which card they have. But a lot of the time it doesn't. A lot of the time the card that you're playing is literally just, cool, now execute this thing. And the choice is in having the 2 cards in hand. I would say the next step up, and I don't have an example of this, maybe you will, would be there is a public market of some number, and you choose one from the public market and execute it, and then replace it.
I remember there was a Ryan Lockett game that felt like it was essentially that, but I could be misremembering because it's been too long. So I'm going to say that I do not know of any game where your action selection is purely select from a market.
The game that I played, this was actually the solve, and I want to dive into why that was. But this one is really interesting because it's quite different to the previous options I've mentioned. Because yes, I'm going to say 3 just arbitrarily. Yes, you only have a choice of 3, but you can also see what everyone else's choices are, and if it does replenish, you can also see like there's a bit of randomness. If it doesn't replenish, then by choosing one from this open market, you are limiting their options as well as making a choice. And if there's a counter, then you don't want to pick a certain one. Like, I think this actually steps up the complexity of the game quite a bit, while still being essentially a trinary choice or a binary choice if there's a market of 2.
Right.
And then you can go as complex as something like he had, which is you always have a hand of 5 and you're choosing one of these 5 and you're replacing it from a market. You go all kinds of different places with it. But I just think that like examining this. So actually, let's dive into a game. Twilight Imperium, one of the biggest, most complex games one of those popular big and complex games on the market. You have a hand of action cards, which is a whole different system to the strategy cards. Strategy cards are drafted from open market. Action cards are different. So you've sort of got like multiple systems interplaying here. And that I would say is like at the higher end of the complexity that a gamer can handle.
Well, and just to reframe this conversation, are you talking about, I thought this was specifically action selection using cards as the core mechanism. Is that what we're talking about today?
Yes.
Or is it bigger?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, for Twilight Imperium, just for people who don't know, you take actions in that game. They're completely agnostic of cards. There are multiple subsystems that utilize cards, but the core of the game is you choose a thing to do. That thing would be either play effectively a card, the strategy tile that you've drafted for the round, or you can move troops on a map, or you can do a bunch of other stuff.
Or you can play a literal action card, and that's the ones I was talking about in hand. So, like that maybe I jumped too complex in an unhelpful way. But the thing that I want to talk about, and I'm exploring this topic as we talk, so pardon if this is a little more rambly than usual. Mini-sode, man, there's no rules. It is in a game. I think you summed it up really nicely. In a game where you are making one primary decision and you want to do it from a selection. There are different ways to do this, and they have different uses, and they are just what am I trying to say? They're really there's effective ways to create different player incentives. Now, the core of development, I would say, not the core of design, but the core of developing a game, is identifying the interesting choices and cutting all the cruft. Would you agree with that as a general rule? So this is something that I think I'm very good at. I could be like, look, here's the interesting part. Now, how do we get to that interesting part in the simplest way possible? So the example I gave was arguably one of the more complex ways possible, where you had a hand of 5 and you simultaneously played one, and then you flipped it and you played them out, and then you restocked from a deck, but you could discard any number first. Let's talk about 5-card poker. So 5-card poker, you have a hand of 5. And then you choose how many you discard, and you redraw that many to the deck, right? That's the core of poker.
I don't know poker very well, so we'll say yes.
Yes. If not, let's say I've just invented a new system. What you're trying to do there, poker's a bad example because you're trying to make sets, but that's not an uncommon thing. At the end of the round of Corpo, for example, the game that you've done development on, and we're coming with from Coffee Bean Games next year or so. You have a hand of 7 cards. You will play 5 of them in a round, and at the end of the round, you can discard down and then you redraw back to 7. So this idea of what are we trying to do? Now, this is gonna differ from game to game, but what you're trying to do is give people enough choice that they don't feel stuck, without giving them so much choice that they're overwhelmed. So there is a sweet spot. There is a point on the charts where you want to hit exactly that point of what's the least choices you can give so the game doesn't overwhelm, or the least rules you can have that guarantees that your player has an interesting choice. And all of these different systems are going to work. So I just want to talk through what they do and what they don't do. So let's start with Carcassonne. Carcassonne, they made the decision while either designing or developing this game that the interesting choice in Carcassonne is placing the tile and then choosing whether or not to place a meeple. And there is a lot of complexity in those two choices. Anytime you have a spatial puzzles, I think we've talked about this before, are like a cheat code for getting maximum gameplay with minimum complexity, because we understand the rules of placement so intuitively that you don't need 10 pages of listing it. Anytime you add a spatial element to your game, you have made the game way more deep without adding that much more complexity. It's like a shortcut. I actually make very few spatial games. I only make them when I'm co-designing. For some reason, my brain doesn't really work that way. And so Carcassonne, the spatial puzzle of where to place it is so complex. And then on top of that, each one can have up to like 3 or 4 different places where the meeple can go. Choosing whether to place the meeple and where to place the meeple is also very complex. So all of that is so much interesting decision space that they made the choice, just draw a tile. Like, that's not where the fun, interesting decisions are. The fun, interesting decisions are those following points. So they went with the bare minimum. And I think we can agree that is the absolute bare minimum that you can possibly do of you get one at random and then you play it. AJ, some people play with this rule of the love letter thing where you have 2, you play 1, you draw 1. Why have they made that change?
Because they didn't feel like they had enough agency. They didn't like feeling like they got screwed over by the luck of the draw and just got something that was useless. Do you want to hear why I think they're wrong?
Yes, I would love that.
So I think that a lot of games that seem to have random elements that sort of turn people off, a lot of the skill of those games is in mitigating the luck, is in dealing with those problems, is in saying, well, I didn't get the perfect, super obvious thing that would just put in the obvious spot, which wouldn't have been that interesting anyway. But because I got this piece that doesn't quite do what I wanted to do, how am I able to use that on this board state in a way that still gets me towards my goals?
Yeah. And I think that Carcassonne actually really boils my point down to its core, which is, I think you said it really well. They didn't feel like they had enough agency. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why we add these other systems in, to give players agency. So I'm going to jump. Oh, go ahead.
And like you said, with the meeples, that is an element that adds other agency. Like, I can't put this thing to complete the city that I wanted, but I can put this meeple down over here that blocks this person from getting, whatever they wanted.
Yeah, and there's also the luck versus skill spectrum, and this one really shifts at one way or the other, etc., and it comes down to what game you're trying to make. And if you want to home rule your games, fucking go for. Oh, sorry, we don't swear on this. Dang, go for it! Like, absolutely. You paid for that game. You play it in the way that's most fun for you. Not that anyone's particularly saying this, but I your shirt says RRFNT right now. The thing that I disagree with is when people use the framing of like, they were wrong. This is an obvious choice that they should have made. And I think that's what we're pushing back on. Okay, so that's the extreme case. The next one is Love Letter. Love Letter, you have 2 cards and choose one. Now, Love Letter is the example because that is almost the entire game. Like I said, there are a few cards that let you like choose a player or choose a player and a card, like the guard or I think, is it the Duke who's like, choose a player, whoever's the highest gets knocked out or whatever. So there are definitely more decisions than just which card you play, but the bulk of the choices in that. Love Letter would probably mostly function if you bumped it up to 3 cards. It would be a quote-unquote worse game, I think. I think that 2 is the right number in the sweet spot, and especially for the limited card count and the player count that he was going for, it works. But there is some flexibility there. But I think with Love Letter, that is the game, so I'm not going to dwell too much on Love Letter. Let's look at a game. I'm trying to think. Magic the Gathering. Great. Okay. AJ, describe to me the card selection and hand process of Magic the Gathering.
So Magic, you get 1 new card every turn from drawing it. There's other ways to get cards, some different abilities on the cards. And when you
start with a hand of
7.
7. Thank you.
And what happens is when you want to play a card, you have to pay for it. How do you pay for it? Well, some of the cards don't have a cost. So there's basically 2 separate things. We call them spells versus lands. Lands generate mana to play the other cards. On your turn, you can only play up to 1 land. And then every turn, you can use that land to generate a mana, and you can spend that mana to play the cards. And the cards have restrictions not just in the amount of mana that they cost, but also the color that they require. So if you play a land, it's only going to produce 1 particular color. And if the card that you have cost that amount of mana, but in a different color, you can't actually play it. So there's multiple layers of restrictions on playing the non-land cards, and the land cards only exist for resources.
And the kind of crux of what we're talking about here with Magic the Gathering is you've got a lot of options. 7 is so much more than Carcassonne or Love Letter present you. And that's 7 at the start. But they are gated. In your hand, they are immediately gated by you can only play one land per turn, and most of them cost more than one land. So on your first turn, it's very unlikely that you'll be able to play your entire hand, for example. I think literally impossible. Unless you have all zero costs or something.
That's a wild game.
Yeah. In a typical game, I don't think it's ever going to happen.
Correct.
And so the thing that we're talking about here is the fact that you have 7 cards, which is a lot. But you get 1 per turn. And so again, that sense of agency, and Magic moves a lot of that agency into constructing your deck. Like, I wouldn't say the majority of the agency, but a lot of the agency is in how you build your deck. And then you are given random stuff, but it's random stuff from a pool that you've created, so it feels less bad when you get the stuff that you when you get a less than ideal draw. It's partially your fault, sort of handing the responsibility over.
Yeah.
But then the interesting part of Magic, in terms of what we're discussing, is that getting that 1 free card per turn, which means that at the start of your turn, you always have an option. You are never got a turn in Magic where you have nothing in your hand, right? Again, not never. I'm sure there's some card that. Yes. The next time you would draw a card, lose the game instead or whatever. But
yeah, the very relevant thing though is if you're empty-handed and you're top decking and you draw a land, yes, you can play the land, but it probably doesn't actually do anything.
Right.
But yes.
and then you're basically playing Carcassonne.
Right. But again, like Peter said, you build your deck to mitigate that. You have mana sinks, you have lands that have utility abilities you can activate, you have card draw, all these different things.
Cards on the board that you can tap, so even if you have nothing in your hand, you can still do something.
Yeah, and actually, interestingly, modern Magic design gives you way more cards than you used to have. If you play with Magic cards from 20 years ago, you run out of cards. That's a very realistic thing to happen. And card advantage, meaning going up on how many cards you have versus your opponent, is an extremely relevant dynamic and a very important way to win the game. And someone actually, I think it was a few years back, did an example where they just counted the number of times any card in the newest set said, draw a card, or draw 2 cards or whatever, and compare that to the number of times they said that 20 years ago, and it was like literally 10 times as many cards. The amount of card flow in today's game is off the charts because they want you to consistently have a reasonable number of options. They don't want you just saying, cool, I only have 1 card.
Right. Do you think that's a shift in their design philosophy, or is that them, as I guess it's the same question, different words, is that them reacting to the way that we play games differently today?
I think it's them realizing that the more fun way to play Magic isn't running your opponent out of resources and winning through attrition. It's winning through strategic use of your resources. So giving players more access to resources, more consistent access to the things that they need, makes for a more fun game.
I've realized another really big direction that you can go with giving people the agency of which card to pick, and that is a pick and pass draft.
Yes.
So I'm going to use Sushi Go as like the example. I realize there's more, but that for me is like the most pure version. So everyone at the start of Sushi Go draws, I don't know, 8 cards, let's say, 6 cards, some number of cards, doesn't really matter. And you are going to choose one of those cards from your hand, and you are going to play that card, and then you're going to hand the rest to your left, have someone hand you one less card than you had at first, play one of those, repeat until all the cards have been played. And so this is a really interesting one because the drafting process is sort of its own huge level of interaction. Like, you want to be looking at what other people are doing, but let's pretend that it wasn't for some reason. Let's pretend that you're all playing your own little siloed game. This means that you get a fresh set of cards each time without having to have everyone draw. Like, it would work very similarly to draw 7 cards, play 1, discard them. Draw 6 cards, play 1, discard them. Draw 5 cards, play 1, discard them. But that's obviously worse because now you have to shuffle the deck or have 600 cards or like all kinds of nightmarish things. So that's another way of really elegantly limiting players' options to like what they have in their hand without making them sequence. Sequencing being like, I'm going to play this one. The next turn I'll play this one. Oh, actually, maybe I should play this one next. No, you know what? I'm going to start with this one. Then like that is a hugely complex way to play. And again, it's kind of replaced by the social element of I'm seeing what you're playing and deciding what to hand you, and that's a great little technique. But just inherently, it's a really elegant way of being like, hey, put the whole deck into people players' hands and just pass it around until they've all been played.
Just for the sake of completionism here, there's also a lot of other types of drafting games that you draft the cards and then have an action selection based off of it. For instance, Inish, you're drafting cards that don't do anything immediately. You do have them siloed face down, and then at the end of the draft, now you're playing troops on that game, and every turn you simply play a card, and that card will move your troops or gain you troops, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And Tsukiyumi does a sort of similarly interesting thing
where
where
this game.
it's really, really cool game. Tons of really interesting design decisions. In Tsukiyumi, what happens is you draft one card, and you have that card for the you draft a hand of cards, and then each turn or each round, sorry, I keep saying the wrong thing. You play a card, and that card is your round. It's like when you get resources, this is how many you get. When you move troops, this is exactly how many you get to move and how you get to move them. When you do combat, if you get to do combat, this is how you get to do it. All these sorts of different things. And so you might have a round where it's like, listen,
it's like a programming game almost.
Yeah.
It's so interesting.
It's cool as heck.
It's funny, as you were describing that, I misunderstood and designed a whole different game in my head, so I might go work on that after this.
Joys being a game designer. It also does another interesting thing while we're talking about action selection from cards, where when you get into a fight with someone, what you do is you have a hand of cards. This is an asymmetric faction game, so each faction has their own types of thematic related battle cards. What you do is you choose one, you hand it to your opponent, and it says, "This is what I do to you. Now, here are your options for how to respond to me." Love it. So, for instance, it's like, "I'm going to nuke you. Everything here is dead." And you're like, well, okay, but the wind blows the radiation back into you and takes out your guys. Or, you shield your one most important unit, but everything else dies, or all these different things. Really interesting system.
I have a system that I don't think is relevant to this conversation. I want to say it just to be a completionist, and also in case you're like, no, Peter, that is directly relevant, which is the deck building mechanism, in that you start with a deck, you have 5 cards in hand. You will often play either all of them or like Dominion. Dominion is actually weird within deck building because it has like one action, one buy. Let's say in a typical game, you play all the cards in your hand, and you draw another 5. You play all the cards in that, you draw another 5. And when they run out, they shuffle. I don't think that really relates to what we're talking about, but I just thought I'd mention that in case you were like, no, Peter, it does.
I think it's worth bringing up in the conversation of card selection, stuff like that.
Yeah. So another very common one is you have a hand of cards and then an open market, which you can add to your hand or play a card. And again, I'm just trying to like the thing I'm trying to discuss. Go ahead.
Can you give a game example?
Ticket to Ride.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, Ticket to Ride, there is a selection of cards available. On your turn, you can either add, it's 2, but I simplified, to your hand, or you can take an action that plays cards from your hand, or there's other actions, blah, blah, blah. But it's this hand management or hand, what options do you have available to you that I'm finding really interesting. So I apologize, it's so rambly. I came in with a thought, and it normally it structures as I go, but I think it's still fruitful.
Well, the good news is I've never had a rambly, incoherent conversation on the podcast that I then had to make a retraction for.
I'm just glancing at my list of games in case there's an obvious one.
I mean, I've got a bunch more. You want me to start going?
Oh, yeah, hit me. Yeah.
Have you played Race for the Galaxy?
Yeah. I played San Juan.
Same thing in terms of this conversation.
Yeah.
So that one, you have a hand of cards, and when you take your turn, you choose which card to play, and the cost for playing the card is a certain number of cards from your hand. And obviously, there's other parts of the game too. This is a subsystem within it.
Yes.
But that's effectively
let's just apply that as a general disclaimer, because I think the thing we're talking about is just different ways to get cards into and out of people's hands, which I think is genuinely a really interesting not deep dive, it's a mini-sode, but a topic to discuss.
Yep. Century Spice Road has one of my all-time favorite mechanics. You've got your hand of action cards. Each turn, you play a card. One of the cards picks up your cards. That's the only way that and oftentimes it varies from game to game. When you play the refresh card, that's when you get another one. Sometimes it's a different card you play that will scoop up a card and add it to your hand.
Century Spice actually is different because you can just... One action you can do is just take a card from the market into your hand.
Okay, sorry. I was thinking more Concordia or Aquatica. But yeah.
Concordia is more like that, yeah.
But yeah, so I love that system. Part of what makes it so good is it's an inherent pacing mechanism and encourages different play patterns. Because you can't, even if you have the best card in the game, you can't just play it every turn. And even if you're like, well, it's really good, all right, we'll play it. Play a whole turn just to pick that card back up. Probably not worth it. And that tension between efficiency and getting the exact thing you want, I think, is so juicy.
Yeah, I love that. I love that mechanism.
My next one is Bonanza. Bonanza's
Oh yeah,
absolutely classic. So in that one, you have a hand of cards, but the
yeah,
order of them is stuck. You have to play the card that's been in your hand the longest, and when cards come in, they come in from the other way, and you must play your next one. So in that game, there are no decisions in terms of your hand order. You must play the next one. Technically, you can play up to two. That's the
yeah,
one decision you can make with playing your cards. It's one, or you can do two, but it's a trading negotiation game. So the idea is you've got a card that's stuck in front of the card that you actually want to play. If you have to play it, that means you have to possibly get rid of a set that you were trying to collect. That makes you really, really incentivized to get this card out of your hand and give it to somebody else, even if you're not getting the best deal. That really greases the wheels in a negotiation game. Great system.
I'm going to talk about my first game, my first published game, which I don't think I've ever talked about on the show before because it's just not that interesting. But in retrospect, very, very simple core mechanism. You've played Scuttle or Ninjutsu, right? At some point?
Yep.
On your turn, you either play a card or draw a card. And that was where I started in game design, so I forget that was not like that's not a common thing that you see in a lot of games. And I remember people really were like, "Oh wow, that's so simple." I was like, "Yeah, it is. I'm amazing at this. The game's not good, but you have I think 5 cards at the start of game, and on your turn you either play one for its action or you draw a card, and so you have a lot of agency in terms of your hand size. Some cards let you draw more, some cards let you attack other people's hands, etc., etc. But that core of you have X cards and you can choose to add to that or play one. In later revisions, I changed that to draw 2 or play 1 because draw 1, play 1 sucks. But in either way, that completely self-controlled economy is quite different to Magic, where it's draw 1 each turn, or San Juan, where it's play 1 and spend a bunch of others. But yeah, draw or play on your turn. It just gives you like a surprising amount of agency as to what options you have available.
Yeah, actually, my favorite video game fairy that is now shadow of its former self. I've talked about this before. I won't go into it. But in that game, you have action points, and 2 of the actions you can do are draw cards or get currency to play cards. And so that becomes a really interesting decision. Whenever I play this with my friend Brent, he would always spend all of his actions to draw cards, so he'd have a huge mitt full of cards and have a ton of different options on his turn. But I like to play it close to chest and be super efficient and aggressive. So I would just basically play off the top of my deck and just make as much currency as possible and swarm the board. And both could be viable options. It was a very cool system.
Yeah. I'm looking at my published games, or my list of games that I've worked on, and I don't think I have many more. So anything else that you've got?
Oh, yeah. So Gloomhaven.
Have I accidentally stumbled into a category you have notes for?
No. I just... hand management is one of my favorite things in the world. So this works well. So Gloomhaven, you play sets of cards, and you choose the top of one, bottom half of the other.
Oh, and yeah, that's really cool.
And you get to be the initiative of either one. And because it's now got 2 cards in the mix, you also have like tiebreakers for initiatives, which can break up some of those things. It's a big, heavy game, so those sorts of things are a bit more acceptable in it. This isn't a published game, but there's one that I was working on that had a similar system to Gloomhaven, where you pair up 2 cards, but the 2 interact with each other. So use the top half of one, bottom half of the other, and then the text combined creates your turn. It's another thing you can do with them. There's Fugitive. Have you played that one?
Yes, Tim Fowles.
Yeah. So that one's interesting in that it's if you're playing as the Fugitive, you're playing cards out, and you can play, I think it's just 1 card on your turn, but the card has to only be within 3 numbers of the previous card you played, except you can discard extra cards to increase that possible range. And the other person is playing a deduction game, so you don't have to even necessarily use the full amount of the movement if you want to try and trick them. A lot of clever stuff you can do with that system. Another really, really dead simple one is simply play X cards of a turn, or play one of one kind, one of a different kind. In Smash Up, if I recall correctly, you can play 1 unit and you can play 1 spell. So it's always up to 2 cards. Hopefully you have one of each of those ones. If not, you can only play 1. But that's a very, very simple, elegant system for how you get the cards out, and while still being a pacing mechanism, because the guys in play actively contribute to you winning different zones. And the spells will mess with things, but usually they're a little bit more support-oriented or indirect. And so having it structured in that sort of different setup is interesting. There's also Mage Wars. Are you familiar with Mage Wars?
No, it's one of those ones that's been on my list forever.
So in Mage Wars, you have spell books, and so rather than a deck of cards, you literally have like a binder, a plastic binder with like plastic slots for your cards. You deck build between games. You have your spell book full of spells, and on your turn, you don't draw a card. You pick which one you want. You flip through your spell book, and you're like, I want to cast this spell. You pull it
Yes,
out.
that's right.
You get to do with it.
Have you played Forest Shuffle?
I think so. Let me just BGG.
Forest Shuffle is really interesting. It has a row of 10 slots in the middle of the board.
Yep.
On your turn, you can basically various cards require you to pay the cards into that discard area, and that's also where other players can draft from. So every time you discard a card, you're making it available to other players. Trees, I think, require you to flip the top card of the deck into that. So almost anything that you do in that game gives other players more options. But then the thing that makes it work is once it hits 10 or once it hits 11, it clears. So you sort of want to like not give people the stuff that's good for their engine into that central space, or wait until you can like do it at a time where the whole thing's going to clear. It's really clever. I love that mechanism. Everdell has something similar with like the commons, I think it's called. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's been a little while for me, so I can't quite remember it though.
There's a big open display of cards, and I haven't played it for about a year now, but I remember like you can put cards in there, and at some points it wipes, and at some points you can like take all the cards from the commons. But it's this idea of like a big pool that you as a player are interacting what goes into it. That's another really interesting way of just creating a huge amount of dynamicism between you and the other players at a very low complexity cost.
Yeah, Glory to Rome does something similar where when you play cards, they just go into the middle, and now they're a different resource that, like, based off of the card type, they can now contribute to your buildings. And so which one you play could change because you're like, well, I don't want to play this because then it puts a brick in there, and I see that they really want a brick. A lot of extra depth, like you said, for no complexity.
Yeah.
Going back to something else you were saying, Ethnos is also a similar hand management one.
That's an interesting one.
Each turn, you either pick up one from the common pool, add it to your hand, or you top deck, add it to your hand. And or instead of picking up a card, you play a set of them, all of the same type of species, or all of the same color. And when you play them, they'll like get you on board for an area control game, but also you have to discard the rest of your hand, so it discourages you to like hoard too much.
Right. It's actually kind of similar to the Concordia thing, where it's like an efficiency puzzle of like I want to have exactly this number.
Yeah. Other ones, Sakura Arms. That one has no cost for playing cards, but certain cards are very strong. The very strong ones require you to spend your entire turn just to play that one card. And the game also has a very tight hand limit, which encourages you to, if you're going to be playing that card, set up for it. Because if you already had your hand full of 2 cards, and then you draw your other 2, and you choose to play the one that takes your whole turn, well, now you have to discard something. So often you're like, well, that's too inefficient. I want to use it for something else. Adds in some interesting trade-offs, again, in a very subtle, very simple, elegant way.
It's been a while since I played... yes. Wingspan. Wingspan is another, like, either take from the market into your hand or play from your hand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't remember if it... Yeah, I couldn't remember if there was a twist to that, but yeah, I think that's how it works. Go ahead.
No, finish what you're saying.
Oh no, that's all. It's not new. I thought it was going to be like a new different system again, but it's not.
Gotcha. So then there is Daybreak. I really love this system.
I haven't played Daybreak yet.
I'm so sad you haven't played it yet. Don't worry, I'm going to make a faction in our game about it. It's as soon as I played it, it was one of those. Why didn't I think of that moments? You know, like
yeah. That was Gloomhaven. So I heard the description of Gloomhaven's action selection. I was like, oh, that is brilliant. Like that is just so amazing. I can see why that built into one of the biggest games in the world.
So in Daybreak, you've got cards with a bunch of different scaling effects, and each card has one or more icons on it. You can have up to, I think it's 4 different piles. Maybe it's 3, something like that. And each turn, you're going to, or each round, you have a handful of cards, and you can play cards on the top or the bottom of the piles. If you play a card on top, you take its action, and it scales based off of the number of relevant icons behind it. If you tuck it behind, then you take the action on the front equal to the number of icons in the same sort of way. So you sort of engine build, and it feels like you're really getting away with something because you're like, cool, I play the card, I get all these icons, I get this huge effect, it feels great. But also, it has some really interesting little tensions in it because chances are if you played a card there, it's because it was a really good card that you want to keep using every turn you want to engine build. But if you tuck something behind it, you're not getting the new action there. So it feels like you're being inefficient. And when you get all the way down for having all the different actions unlocked on it, you're like, I just want to keep hitting that. But then you're, again, not using cards to build up your other things. So it has all these nice, delicious little tensions. And all it is you play a card on the top or the bottom and do what it says based off how many actions. So
That's
clean.
Great.
Love that system.
I feel like we're drifting away from hand management, but keep going.
Am I? That's hand management. No, that's how you play the card. You're right. Yeah. You're right. That, I mean,
still cool, but
it's getting the card out of the hand, right?
Yeah,
that's fair. So the Seven Wonders Duel is a version of drafting, but it's on the board, and you have like a grid layout of it, and some of them are face down, some are face up, and you unlock new options as you remove cards from it. That's a unique way of getting your cards.
Yeah, for sure.
And Traders of Osaka
it's like an open market with like 2 extra interesting steps.
Mm-hmm. Traders of Osaka is a highly interconnected game. It's basically, I know I've talked about it on the podcast before, like a gamer's ticket to ride. If you pick up a card from the market and add it to your hand, you just did like 7 things. You have now removed an option for your opponent. It can insure goods to protect them in case of storms. It can be used as money to buy other cards. And it makes it so that if someone wants to buy out the remaining cards, which is a very different type of action to add it to your hand, which then becomes currency, then that color ship will no longer move on its journey, and they won't be able to add those goods to their cargo hold to get points. So it's again a very simple, slight difference to Ticket to Ride, where it has a hugely different payoff.
Okay, give me one more.
That was actually my whole list, so I could think of one more, or we can just end it there.
So I just want to talk about why we've just listed a bunch of stuff, and like I said at the start, it's about having tools in your tool belt. When you're prototyping a game, when you're designing a game, when you're developing a game, when you're playtesting someone else's game, I tend to be a little suggestion heavy in playtesting, which I know is bad form, but also I've been doing this for a long time and I'm good at what I do. Do as I say, not as I do. It's just really useful to have this list to cycle through in your head. AJ and I will never stop talking about this AEG game that we're working on, because each faction has a different way of interacting with the board and a different way of interacting with their elements. And so within this one game, even just looking at our starting 6 factions, we use probably like 4 or 5 of these. There's one faction where every time you get a new power, you just flip it off the top of the deck and you have it available. There's one where you have a hand of 3, and when you get to play one, you play one, draw one. There's at least, I'm just going to go through them. There's a faction where you have a hand of 2 at the start of the game, and you can play them, but it's a whole separate action to redraw. So you have to control your own hand economy. There's one which is playing the Concordia Century Road, where you play them, but then there's a separate action that pulls them all back to your hand. There's a dice faction which doesn't really apply here. Who am I missing? Oh, yeah, the Scarab. So the Scarab, you want them on the board, and there are various options to either build them into your hand and then play everything from your hand, or put them straight into the board and they never enter your hand. It's just like within this one game, we have needed all of these different tools. And so I don't even want to say when you've run into a problem. Here we go. Here's my advice to the listeners. Look at whatever game you're working on right now and ask yourself, this selection I have, this system I have for selecting cards and playing them, could it be simpler? Like, again, the dirt simplest is the Carcassonne. Just flip the top card of the deck and do that. That's not going to be right for most games. Most games don't do that for a reason. I would say the most common is you have a hand of cards and you either refill it as soon as you play, get one at the start, or you control your own economy. I'd say those are the 3 that most games do. AJ, you ever thought?
My only counter-argument was to your first comment of not drawing the card and doing the thing. Basically, every roll and write is that. So that is one notable exception.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. A lot of those will still provide a choice. It'll be like, draw 3 and choose one. But that's one we haven't even covered. Every turn, Draw 3 cards, choose one. Um, this is not just an excuse to list mechanics. I really do think it's valuable to have this list in your head so that you can be like, okay, what's the most recent game you worked on other than ours, AJ?
I'm working on a Mad Max sort of game.
Okay. Is there any kind of like card action selection system in that?
It's secondary. It's like the action cards
That's
in
fine.
Twilight.
Okay, so what's the system that you're currently using?
So the system that we're currently using is you have two of these cards in your hand, and one of the actions you can take on your turn, instead of doing normal, more basic things, is you play one of these cards out, and you do whatever it says on the top half. That's like a specific, like thematic, cool thing that's a bit flashier than a normal basic attack. And then the bottom half of it is something that on another player's turn, they can use the bottom half of it, and then that's when you get your new card back. So it's a co-op game.
Oh,
you play
that's
the
interesting.
card out, you do something, and then thematically, like they can do something that's linked to that gets you the new one.
A new one or that one back?
A new one.
Okay, so it's a
so for instance,
ally-controlled economy.
Yeah, so it's like I kick this guy off, and he like flies to the back of the car, and then if your partner goes to that guy on that turn, they can like stomp their feet as they're like trying to climb up. They're out of the game. And then boom, you comboed with them, you get to draw another card. And then there are specific times where you get to refresh if you didn't take advantage of that while you could.
So that one's too interesting to be useful for our purposes. It also reminded me that the Earthworm that we're working on today has a unique system, which is you're blackjacking, so just flipping cards from the top of the deck until you either bust or choose to stop. And then the ones that you activate go away and the rest get shuffled back into the deck. So there is a weird level of deck control. This came up organically as we were playtesting it. This wasn't what we came into the playtest with, but like we've accidentally created this whole new system that maybe someone will find useful. But let's say your Mad Max thing wasn't working. It was too whatever. Cool. Well, now you have the option of what if you just flip it, like whenever you use a card, you just flip the top one and that's what you get. What if you have an open market and every time you choose one, you're recruiting that specific guy for that specific purpose and it replaces? What if you're recruiting it from the market into your hand and then from your crew you can play one? What if you have 4 guys, your ally has 4 guys, every time you play one, you both swap hands, Like, all of these are viable systems. I'm not saying specifically for your game, I obviously don't know enough, but they are all tools that you can pull out when you're like, man, I really need to, like... No, sorry. Again, I keep framing this as solving a problem. I'm talking about simplifying your game. With this train game, I've told this story a few times now, I sat there through the cool part and got excited, and then the rest of the explanation was like, what is happening here? This is just so over-convoluted. This is way too much. What's the simplest way you can do Carcassonne? Too simple? Okay, what's the next one? So with that one, we ended up trying a few different things. I think we tried like you have 5 and you play 1 each turn until and the game just goes for 5 rounds. So it's a we didn't even put that in our list, by the way. It's a what would you call that? Where like you're diminishing options each turn, but in a way that you're controlling.
I don't know if I have a specific term for that, but yeah, that type of thing where it's like round based or something where you play out 1 card a turn from your hand, and then at the end of that round you draw back up.
Right.
I don't have a name for it, but it happens.
That for the entire game was one thing we tried, and in the end, for that playtest, I don't know what he's done with it since. Hopefully found either a better system or this one worked. There were just 3 options, public to all. You would play one, it would replenish, and this did remember that very complicated system I explained right at the start of the episode. Mm-hmm. This did everything that system did. This covered all of it because you had just enough agency. With the minimal possible complexity, you could see what counterplays are available. There was a bit of randomness. The game that does this is Calico.
Oh, sorry. Just when you said counterplay, I was like, oh, Onitama. That's a good one.
That's also a very good one. Calico, there's 2 options out. You choose one, it replenishes. Your opponent goes. There's 2 options out, it replenishes. That's one that does this exact system, but with 2. Onitama is a great one. Do you want to quickly explain that, and then we'll wrap up?
Yep. So in Onitama, you have one of 2 options in front of you. Your opponent has 2 options in front of them, and there's 1 option between you 2. On your turn, you choose one of the 2 options in front of you and swap it for the one that's in the middle between you. And then your opponent would choose one of their 2, swap it for the one that you just put in the middle. And so it's got this nice ebb and flow of if they win, it's because you handed them a move. And it's also kind of similar to Raw, if you've played that one, where it's an auction game. and if you win the auction, the money card tile that you won the auction with swaps for the one that was in the auction. So part of what you're bidding for isn't just the valuable stuff there; it's also for the next bidding tile that you're going to end up with.
Have I told you why I always bounce off Onitama? I want to like it so much, and it just doesn't work for me.
Why?
Because it's going to sound weird, because it's asymmetrical in that, like, some cards are up one and then left, some cards are up one and then right, and I just don't have a very good spatial brain. I cannot keep track of that, and I hate it so much. I hate it. I just wish that, like, it was like, imagine if you had a knight in chess that was only forward 2 and then left, and a knight that was only forward 2 then right. It just doesn't work with my brain at all. So I want to love that game because it's so brilliant. I like abstracts, but every time I play it, I'm like, oh, right, I can't, okay. It just annoys me. It's an aesthetic thing. I'm not saying it's a fault of the game. Just for me, I'm like, just don't make left and right matter. I hate that. AJ, publishing tip. I forgot to prep one. Do you have anything? If not, I'll come up with one.
Yeah, come up with one.
So I'm trying to tie it into the episode. Okay, this is a really weak one. If you're like, Peter, that doesn't count, I will come up with a better one. Do the work before you pitch. And I know how stupid that sounds. But this thing that we just discussed now of like, hey, could your action selection system be more elegant? That's low-hanging fruit for a publisher to say no. Publishers, they want to say yes, but if you give them any excuse to say no, they have to say no. So a weird way to think about pitching is giving a publisher a very good excuse to say yes and no excuse to say no. That's a kind of warped way to think about it, but you want a game that they're excited by and you haven't made any obvious mistakes. We actually sort of cover this in our sell sheets a lot, where it's like, man, I want to like this game, but you've just given me a big wall of text that I have to read. If you present a publisher with, like, again, let's use this train game as an example. I'll try not to bring this up every moment for the rest of my life, but it's on top of my mind lately. I really liked it. I really enjoyed this prototype. A publisher, in an ideal world, they can do what I do and be like, hey, this is convoluted, let's replace it with this. Don't make them do that work. And this guy didn't, just to be clear. He was not pitching. This was at a playtest event where he wanted feedback and he wanted the game to be better. Like, I'm sort of now infamous for pitching a game before it's ready, but I still make sure that I've played it enough that I'm like, okay, cool. This system is as clean as it can be. This system is as clean as it can be. This system is as clean as it can be. The things I don't worry about so much are balance, because, you know, if it breaks in the game, yeah, that's a huge other issue. If, like, oh man, this game has this faction wins 60% of the times more than others, I don't care about that at all. That'll be fixed later. But just don't give them a game that is clearly there's a better way to do this and you just haven't bothered finding it yet. Do the work.
Yeah, there's a game I'm pitching right now, and basically it's you can play the map multiple times, the same map multiple times, but realistically a lot of the experience is in going through that map without knowing what's going on. And so we had pitched it to this publisher, and they were pretty concerned because they were like, well, listen, it's going to be very expensive to just produce a bunch of maps for this game. And this is after they just played like one map as a tutorial level type thing. We hadn't like explained all the rest of what we had going on. And so if I just said, oh, shoot, yeah, it's true. What are you going to do about it? Like, that's your problem, publisher. That's an answer. Yeah. And if you really friggin' loved the game, maybe he would solve that. But me and my co-designer, we've thought about this a lot. And we were like, so listen, here's like the 3 different ways that we see that we can produce maps. And yes, it will take more maps. Like, there's no way around that. But here's how we can modify maps very simply without costing you more money. Here's how we can stretch the ones that we have in multiple different ways. Here's the different ways that we've thought about this problem and how it could be less of a burden for you as a publisher. And maybe it's still too much, but at least I went into that situation being prepared for the issue that he had and being upfront with it, you know?
In the Daniel.Games episode that we just recorded,
all right, you want to have some fun?
Can you not hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, cool. I was halfway through the sentence, so there must have been a lag. In the Daniel.Games episode that we just recorded, we were talking about how if your game has a flaw, it's not done. Like, you can't excuse away the flaw. And I want to make sure we're differentiating between what you're talking about of, like, the flaw of maps are expensive. You're not making excuses. You're not like, yeah, but the game needs them. You're talking about having come up with solutions to the problem. And I run to this too, where I'll pitch a game to a publisher and they'll be like, yeah, cool, but Peter, we can't do it for this component reason. And I'm like, well, actually, I've designed it so that, yeah, there are 10 dice, but they're all the same die, and that is cheaper. Or, you can think of a million examples, but like, if you've foreseen the problem and solved it, that's different to being like, yeah, but this problem has to exist for the game to work. I just want to make sure that differentiation was clear. Mm-hmm. AJ, fun now.
Yep. What is your longest running in-joke?
Okay, so I have two sisters who I'm very close with. We talk almost every day. One sister I talk to every day, the other one I don't. And over the years, which one has reversed a few times. It's funny how that works. And in 2008, 2007 maybe, I filmed a bunch of TV pilots. I was like, I want to write TV, so I made 4 TV pilots in a year. I made 3 TV pilots in a year, which is too many. I wrote, started, directed in all of them. I burned myself out. I had a full breakdown. I think we've talked about this before. There's like a big chunk of 2008 that I just don't remember what happened because I was so burned out from this. Testing. Hello?
You
what was the last thing you heard?
You lagged. You talked to your sisters a lot, and then it started kind of.
I told the whole story about TV pilots, so I'm just going to go from there. This is going to need some editing. Sorry. Oh my god!
Lost you again.
I'm texting you in Discord.
I can hear you now.
Cool.
I saw you open Tabletop Simulator. Maybe that's causing the lag spike?
Oh, I didn't. That's weird. It's been open the whole time. Must be my internet dropping in and out.
Gotcha. All right, well, I guess I'll just jump into mine.
No, I haven't told mine yet.
Oh.
And so one of these filmed a bunch of TV pilots, too many a year, burned out. One of these that we filmed at my childhood home in Glenbrook, not Glenbrook, in Toowoomba. And for some reason, I don't know why, at the end of it, we were like, okay, ma, rhinoceros kisses. What does that mean? Who knows? Why do rhinoceros kisses ma? But we made this joke as if it was an established joke that we'd been doing for years. And since then, we always end every call and every conversation with ma, rhinoceros kisses. It's the most dumb nonsense joke that is still going after, what's it been, 17 years.
That's so sweet.
What about you?
So I have a friend named Brent.
Yes, from the story earlier. He played Ferraria with you.
Ferraria. where everyone drives cars around in a safari. Visual listeners on YouTube can see that I'm wearing a lovely shirt that says "Suck it, Brent," as because many times over the years we would play games or something, and he would get a bad dice roll, and I would tease him and say "Suck it, Brent" or various other things, and then it sort of expanded it from that more and more to me just saying it at any time at his misfortune.
It expanded out, rhinoceros kisses.
And I started saying it so much that Con with all our friends, and then it like just started spreading around with like other people, and it got to the point where like I would say it so much and other people would say it so much that "Suck it, Brent" was like a phrase that wasn't that uncommon. Like I'm not saying like everyone in town was saying it, but like people would use that phrase. And everybody who knew me would know of Brent just through the "Suck it, Brent" meme. And then
including me. That's how I heard of Brent for the first time.
Yeah. And he worked at a gas station. So sometimes people would go in, read his name tag, and be like, wait a minute, are you "Suck it, Brent"? And he started getting that so often. Like
it sounds like they're propositioning him.
Yeah. Many people met Brent, but just from reading his name tag being like, oh, you're "Suck it, Brent." It was great. And then eventually I ended up getting shirts made and gave it to all of our friends. It's very fun.
Was your gaming handle for a while.
Yeah, it was my game handle for absolutely everything, including TTS. The only reason I took it off was because I started playing with publishers. I thought that was a little unprofessional.
I remember. I think I remember having a conversation, being like, "Hey AJ, if we're playing with a publisher, can you not be suck at Brent?" And you're like, "Yeah, that's not a bad idea." I read a sitcom that never filmed it, but there was a character called Mitch, and like the catchphrase was like, "Oh God, you're a fool, Mitch." And so it never caught on. But even today, I'm sometimes like, "You're a fool, Mitch." It's just like one of those.
Oh, there's someone in one of our chats who's "You're a fool, Mitch."
Yeah, Mitch. AJ, can I tell you how we end this podcast?
No.
Oh.
I will tell you how we end this podcast.
No, I'm going to tell you. We end this podcast as we always do by going, "Mwah, mwah, mwah, rhinoceros kisses!"
Mwah, 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 rhinoceros kisses.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us. You can find us and our incredible Discord community in the show notes, or reach out to us privately at funproblemspodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed the podcast, please tell a friend.